All right, hello everybody, and welcome to this rather extraordinary interview we have with Randall Terry, the founder, the initial guy who really got Operation Rescue going back in the day. Randall, thanks very much for joining us.
Michael, it's always a pleasure. I love you dearly, man.
Just right back at you. Many people may not know what Operation Rescue was back in the day, but you got this brainstorm of an idea to have thousands of pro-lifers descend on individual abortion chambers, mills around the country. You got probably I would say, the most visible traction because you did it for a number of years in a row, a number of different efforts. But I think the one that got the most attention was like 3,000 or 4,000 people in Wichita, Kansas, at the abortion chamber of Dr. George Tiller, known as Tiller the Killer, because he was doing third trimester abortions there. Where did you get the idea from? It was obviously shut it down, and it did work for a while, and you got all the publicity and everything from it, and hundreds of cops, some of whom were extremely abusive towards pro-lifers who they were arresting and dragging away. Where'd you get that idea from?
Well, it was kind of an intersection of three things. I was Protestant at the time, and I had gone to Bible college, and I was studying the works of Francis Schaeffer, Dr. Francis Schaeffer, who many people know, brilliant mind, was clearly not Catholic, but nevertheless got a lot of things right with the supreme authority of Jesus Christ in the earth, and that Christians are called to be in the political realm. And he also started introducing the concept of civil disobedience. Mm-hmm. So that was going on in my head. And then in a prayer meeting in 1983, October of 83, someone came in and said, "We've got to pray that God ends abortion in America. It's horrible. I just saw a special on TV, and who killed the baby or who broke the baby." And so I always got a sick feeling in my stomach when I thought about abortion. But at that time, I was the type of Christian who was what we would call an escapist. I thought that we were just called to preach the gospel and try and get people to go to heaven, and that was it. Didn't have any concept of social duty as a Christian. So we go to our little room, we start praying, and I had a vision. So I literally saw a scroll coming down in front of me with words written on it, explaining to me what I was supposed to do. And I had snapshots, like pictures. And I could see thousands of people around abortion clinics. I saw us helping moms to not kill their baby, but have their baby and then put their baby up for adoption. I saw myself on Donahue. I literally had a snapshot that I would be on the Phil Donahue show. So this is all happening in this prayer meeting, and I'm not saying a word to anybody.
For the audience, Randall, the Phil Donahue show was the very first of the talk shows that we've all come to know, and they've proliferated by the dozens and dozens now. But Phil Donahue was the very first one, and to be on that show was that was quite the that would be quite the coup if you were somebody. Yeah. Phil Donahue is a Notre Dame grad, but he wild liberal, didn't really believe anything the church taught, all that sort of stuff. He sort of blazed the trail in the talk show world, and so to be on that with this cause was quite the score.
It was extraordinary. So I had the vision in 83. I ended up being on Donahue in 91. So it was 8 years later, but I was on in a room full of 5,000 people. It was me against Faye Waddleton, the head of Planned Parenthood. But anyway, I had this vision, didn't know what to do. I didn't say a word to anybody because I thought, am I going crazy? I mean, this type of thing was not normal for me. So I started studying my Bible and stumbled on this concept of innocent blood. And so I studied the word blood or bloodshed from the book of Genesis all the way through the book of Revelation. And as I read all these scriptures and saw this concept of the shedding of innocent blood, which usually meant killing babies. In the Old Testament, when it talked about the shedding of innocent blood, it usually had to do with child sacrifice.
Correct.
And I thought, this really is God. God showed me something I'm supposed to do. So I began to talk to a few people quietly because I didn't know what they would think. Yeah. And then the third element was, after I started my pro-life work, I started standing in front of the abortion clinics by myself and then a few people started to join us. And this is before I even knew that there was a Joe Scheidler or a Joan Andrews or a John Ryan. I had no idea that anybody else was even doing this. That's
Right.
how sheltered I was. So once I started doing my work, I watched a series called Eyes on the Prize, which was 6 parts, and it was about Dr. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement. And so when I thought about Dr. Francis Schaeffer with the theology of civil disobedience, we must obey God rather than man.
Mm-hmm.
And then saw the fruit of the civil rights movement, it just gelled in my heart. And I said, that's it. That is what we're doing. That's where it all, all those people I saw in my vision, thousands of people around the abortion clinics, it's now all coming together. And we went forward and started, as you know, in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. That was our trial run. We had over 300 people blocking the door of Cherry Hill Women's Center in the fall of '87. And we showed that it could work. They never opened up. We saved babies. And I have to tell you this one story. At that abortion clinic that day was a Catholic grandma. She was in her 50s. Her granddaughter was scheduled to kill her baby that day at that abortion clinic. And because we were there blocking the doors, she didn't go through with it and ended up having the baby. And the grandma didn't know. The granddaughter had not told anyone that she was pregnant. So that we have tons of stories like that. And then we went to New York and then to the Democrat convention in '88. And then it just mushroomed.
Right.
And to give your younger viewers an idea of how big it was, the civil rights movement from 1958 to 1968 had just over 7,000 arrests for peaceful civil disobedience. The rescue movement, as we called it, from 1987 to 94 had over 70,000 arrests.
Right.
It was literally 10 times the size of the civil rights movement. But because we haven't won yet, winners write history.
Right.
And they've tried to literally erase us from history. I mean, we used to dominate the news night after night after night.
Yeah.
I was on Oprah twice.
As a journalist,
one-on-one interview with Dan Rather.
I used to cover this stuff routinely. As a matter of fact, because I was pro-life in the newsroom when I got here to Detroit, and that's when all of this was really at its height, back in the early 90s. I got the assignment of covering all of this all the time and everything. Yeah, it was I don't know if I would necessarily say it was nightly, but it was one of the dominant headlines of that era constantly, in particular the Wichita. How many people were in Wichita, pro-lifers? It was like 3,000 or 4,000. Am I remembering the number correctly?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, I think the total number of arrests just in Wichita was between 2,600 and 2,700.
Right.
And when we finished our time there, there was a rally that had 30,000 people.
Right.
30,000 people attended that. And what we did was, while we were in Wichita, we were recruiting people to run for office, recruiting them to get involved in the Republican establishment. And within 2 or 3 years, the fruit of that time in Wichita literally shifted the power structure of politics in Wichita and ended up having a massive influence on the Republican Party there and what laws were passed. And not just there, but around the country.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, you began all of your effort with this in kind of in earnest. Again, I'm talking sort of once it got to its apex and was a dominant, talking point in the pro-life movement, and a dominant effort in the pro-life movement. That was approximately, the 15 to 18 years after Roe. It's when the Planned Parenthood versus Casey decision was handed down by the Supreme Court, shifting the legal analysis, but still allowing for, holding that you still had a constitutional right to an abortion and all of that, which, took 30 more years to overthrow. What sort of response or interaction were you having with the Republican establishment back in the day? Because, there's lots of people just say, they talk a big game, kind of like Democrats talking about improving the lives of Black Americans. Of course, never really happens to come to fruition, but they keep talking about it. Were you running into any headwinds in the Republican establishment because of your efforts?
Yes, without question. And it was interesting because people like Chris Smith, who got into Congress as a young conservative pro-lifer, they were there. But what the rescue movement did, if you read the book Wrath of Angels, the premise of the book is that Operation Rescue and the rescue movement fueled the so-called Christian right. And the evangelical community and the Roman Catholic community, for the first time in modern history, banded together in a political push to outlaw abortion. And it basically drove the Republican establishment into the corner of having to say, yes, we're pro-life. And so the moral majority was helped by us. The Christian coalition was fueled by us. There wouldn't have been a Christian coalition as it was back then without Operation Rescue. And we started saying, we'll help you get elected, or we're going to help defeat this candidate. And when you look at all these trigger laws that just went into effect when Roe was overturned, a lot of those laws came from people who were in Operation Rescue and then went into the political realm, either themselves or helped other people get in. So at the beginning, you had guys like Bob Packwood,
Yep.
who was a Republican but was pro-abortion. And I preached to him for probably a half an hour one time when outside of Union Station in Washington, D.C. about innocent blood. And he was waiting for something, or I don't know why he was there. But we had people that were ardently with us, like Senator Humphrey from New Hampshire. We had people like Bob Packwood that were against us. And then we had people in the middle who I think said, okay, here's the tea leaves. We're going to have to at least pay lip service and say our commitment is to overturn Roe versus Wade.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the political establishment just sort of, some members embraced the cause, not just Operation Rescue itself, but the pro-life movement and saving babies and that whole aspect of that whole dynamic, the larger dynamic of it? But would you say for the most part you just got the movement just sort of got some lip service from the establishment, Republican establishment?
I did a song a few years ago called "The Little Red Dress," and it was about the GOP leadership using us for our votes, for our money, and for our volunteer time. And that's the truth. There were a lot of members of the Republican establishment that just gave us promises and then betrayed them.
Right.
But tragically, it was the only game in town. So we knew who was legit. We knew who was really with us. And we saw them rise to levels of heroism in the last days of Roe, the last years of Roe, when they were introducing this legislation. And then we saw people who were paying lip service.
Right.
For me, when President Trump was running for office, I was, at the beginning, I thought I'd like Ted Cruz or something. But the more I watched the Republican debates, the more I thought Trump is the guy because he's a disruptor. He will disrupt the Republican establishment. Yeah. And, the Democrat establishment, they're honest enemies.
Right.
They will stab you in the chest.
Right.
They will say, this is what I believe, and I'm coming for you. The Republican establishment are treacherous friends, many of them, not all of them, but they'll stab you in the back. So when I saw candidate Trump, I thought, he's going to disrupt the Republican establishment, which I was so happy to see. And then when he cut that deal over the judges, he said, I promise to only appoint pro-life judges. I said, man, I am in. And he honored his commitment. And we are dancing on the grave of Roe versus Wade because of it.
Let's talk about now post-Roe, post-Dobbs. We're in the era of Dobbs. Do you think there is, you're Catholic now. You said when all this began originally way back, you were Protestant, but now you're Catholic. Do you, as you look into your crystal ball on this, and you've got a pretty good record of looking into the crystal ball. I think most people would have to agree with that. Even if it's stumbling and bumbling a bit, hey, it's hard to predict the future. But you're certainly more right than you're not. as we look out onto the landscape, the political landscape, the cultural landscape, which really gives birth to the political landscape, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. What do you think the future of abortion is here in the United States on a state-by-state level? I think we've got, 10 states that have settled this, as far as 8 or 10 states who have like, yep, this is it. You can kill a baby until he graduates from high school, and you do whatever you want. It's constitutional right and all that. We here in Michigan have I'm kind of stunned that I even can say this, that between New York and California is Michigan, and Michigan has the most pro-abortion law on the books of all 50 states because of a referendum that got passed in November of 2022 during the midterms. Do you think that Planned Parenthood and the pro-abortion movement is looking at all of those electoral successes, trying to grab some sort of template, and they're going to try to go reproduce that in 2024 and again in 2026?
There's no question. I don't want us to run out of time, and so I'm going to ask your advice or your permission here. What I want to answer the question, and I have an answer that is going to shock people and jar people, hopefully into like a moment of reality. I think we're going to show that template or the promo for the documentary. Is that, are we going to do that?
Yeah, we'll edit it in. We won't show it now, but yes, we'll edit it in, right?
Okay, so I want people to see that so that they can see what got us here. And then I can tell people what's going to get us to victory. And if we want to be victorious, there are certain things we are going to have to do. And if we don't do them, we will not win.
Right.
There's no question. So I'm your guest. It's your show. What do we do? What do you want to do?
Oh, sure. Well, let's take a break right now. We're gonna run that promo.
It's called Operation Rescue, and they say that their mission is to stop what they call the murder of innocent babies, no matter what price they have to pay.
They're on the way to jail, and if they come back tomorrow, we'll arrest them again tomorrow, and so forth and so on. We're going to maintain law and order.
We expected them to be rougher than usual, but we didn't. Inflicting severe pain on people.
Understand why you put somebody in jail in America because they don't want to see babies killed. And frankly, I can't understand that either.
Can you tell us how many total arrests were there today?
591.
They aren't in Kansas anymore. Today, the anti-abortion group Operation Rescue and pro-choice supporters are drawing battle lines in Buffalo.
Nearly 2,000 people have turned out at this church just northeast of Buffalo to pray and to plan, calling on the name of God to bless their efforts to rescue unborn babies.
Lord God, tonight as we lift up our hands to you,
We as a church and individuals needed to repent of our lack of involvement on trying to stop the killing of innocent children.
We are not going down there as the heroes. We are going down there in a spirit of repentance. We are guilty. The blood is on our hands. We're 15 years late. There's no heroes here. We are more guilty than the police when they take us away, because the police are not called to be the salt of the earth. We are.
Mike, I know that the mayor of Buffalo, as you mentioned last night on Nightly News, practically invited the demonstrators from Operation Rescue.
What does it mean to love my neighbor as myself? Well, according to the Good Samaritan, it means that if your neighbor is in danger of death, dying in the ditch, you save him.
We're going down to a killing center today. Many of you are placing yourselves in a vulnerable position. You might be hurt.
And this man's severely fractured arm.
But if you begin to suffer, You must still do nothing wrong.
Is getting arrested too radical? It's obvious it can't be too radical in the face of mass murder.
You are as safe in jail as you are in the protective hands of God any place else. The mercies of God are everlasting and are new every morning, and you see them in jail in a way that you never do any other place.
I was arrested over 50 times, and jailed over 50 times.
The one thing that it has done is to bring this issue a little bit more clearly before the minds of other people.
Media coverage is critical to bringing your message out to the public, to the masses. Finally, there are Christians by the hundreds who are putting their bodies and their freedom on the line to save innocent children and to create the social tension that was so desperately needed.
Operation Rescue is a new and a fresh breath of air. Politicians never see the light until they feel the heat.
There was a Monday in America where you could own a slave, and then the following Monday, you could not. And I don't think that many hearts were changed between those two Mondays. What was changed was the law.
We're saving children and mothers today. We're doing it in such a way that will provide the political clout to change the laws tomorrow.
And we will launch an equal force against state legislatures to chip away at Roe and to ultimately make child killing illegal again. I am convinced Roe will fall and child killing will be driven back to hell where it came from.
Friend, as you can see, this is a huge undertaking. We are asking for your financial help. Our goal with this documentary is to capture the history of what happened and to show how the rescue movement went to seed and was a key part of bringing down Roe versus Wade. And we also want to inspire the next generation to take this battle to completion and to make it a crime in all 50 states to kill a baby from conception until birth. Please be as generous as you can and invite your friends to do the same. God bless you.
All right, Randall, so you got us to this point, you and some other, Joe Scheidler, God rest his soul, many good, wonderful leaders on the pro-life side, all of them, Judy Brown with American Life League, and just so many, wonderful giants. But yes, getting rid of Roe was only the first step. Now we've got 50 skirmishes in all of the various states. What do we do?
There are 5 rules. I jokingly call them Randall's rules for righteous revolution. There are 5 rules that fit over every social revolution or paradigm shift in American history. Okay? And they are incendiary images, righteous, intense rhetoric, aggravating actions, serious sacrifice, and then total political legal victory. Total. So, for example, if you look at the Stamp Act in the 1760s, the Boston Tea Party, the end of slavery, women's voting rights, the end of child labor, the end of segregation, all of these movements had these 5 elements in common. So they had incendiary rhetoric, whether it was the women saying, "You won't let us vote because we're your slaves. Men are the tyrants of our time." They had, or the segregationists just browbeating the racists, the child labor movement saying, these monsters who are the big businessmen, they don't care about our children, they're villains. So they had incendiary rhetoric, and then they had these intense images, pictures, hanging the stamp collector in effigy. We saw the pictures of the water cannons and the dogs with the civil rights movement. We saw images of women getting arrested and taken away in the suffragette movement. So you have rhetoric, images that are all intense and incendiary, and then you have aggressive actions. In every single movement that I've mentioned, there was always the element of civil disobedience and social protest, all of them. And they created enormous tension, social tension, and it was deliberate because people would snap their heads and look at what it was and then consider. So then you had real sacrifice. And in these movements, there was always people that went to jail. In some of the movements, there were people that were killed. In some of the movements, there were people who had broken bones. They lost their livelihood. They lost their home. I lost my home. Planned Parenthood and NLW sued me repeatedly, and everything was taken except my books. I got to keep my books, some of which you see behind me.
And your guitar.
So I got the guitar since then. Thank you. So you had serious sacrifice. And then finally, what you had was total victory. Right. So no one can own a slave. Women can vote anywhere. No children are at work in textile mills or in the coal mines. So our mission is to make it a crime from conception until birth to kill a human being. That's it.
Yep.
That's the mission. And now, yes, do I want to change hearts? Sure. But like the clip in the promo said, there was a Monday when you could own a slave. There was a Monday when you could not own a slave. And the thing that changed in that week was the law.
Right.
So if we're going to get total victory in this fight for the babies, we must use these 4 weapons: the rhetoric, the images, the aggressive actions, the sacrifice. And if we don't, if we lay these weapons, these rules, if we lay them at the feet of our enemies and say, oh, we won't call abortion murder. Right. We won't show pictures of dead babies. We won't do any civil disobedience. We won't disrupt anything. No, we just want a calm conversation. We just want a place at the table. I don't want a place at Planned Parenthood's table.
Right.
I want to take their table and turn it into firewood. So
perfect.
Thank you. This is what. So I'm answering your question sort of from the side.
Sure.
We can win.
Yep.
We can win if the church militant will be the church militant.
Correct.
If we try and be the church flabby or the church nicer than Jesus, we're doomed.
Right.
Because these people who kill babies are in deadly earnest.
Yep.
And they will stop at nothing to continue this Holocaust.
Yeah, it's one of the it's one of the very thing you're talking about, the approach, the philosophical approach of it has been sort of the driving force since the first days here of Church Militant. We're not going to sit around and debate whether, a bishop, could have or should have said something a little differently or been a little more prudent. Yo, bishop, you're wearing red because you're supposed to sacrifice your life for the sheep if you have to. And what you're doing is nowhere near sufficient to meet the oncoming force of evil. Team evil. I mean, these guys are trying to destroy the church, God, faith, everything. So you can't sit down and have a conversation across the table, a goodwill conversation with somebody who wants to kill you. And that's what they want to do.
It would be like the Jews and the Nazis trying to have a civil dialogue.
Yeah.
It's absurd on its face.
It is. It's crazy. So I mean, when you're staring evil in the face, and look, people. It's up to God to judge them. We don't judge their souls and their mind, how they got there, but their actions are certainly worthy of judgment. And when they kill children, you're possessed. There's something diabolical in your thinking when you deliberately go out and not just do it, but then build an industry around it, make a living off it, and protect it and enshrine it in law. It's horrible. I do want to ask you, as a Catholic now, as you look out, this is the last question, as we look out on all of this as a Catholic, what do you think of the church's response to the whole abortion industry, the whole world of abortion? I think most people pretty much know we're on record as saying, pathetic would be a word to describe it on a good day.
The Bible says, St. Peter said, and Ezekiel said, judgment begins at the house of God.
Right.
So in the story of the Good Samaritan, Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. And the Pharisee, willing to justify himself, said, well, who's my neighbor? So Jesus tells the story about the man dying in the ditch. And the priest walks by, and the Levite walks by. thereby sinning. They committed the sin of omission.
Right.
And it was the Samaritan, the heretic, the person that, you know, the Jews would sooner spit than they would sooner hang out with a Gentile than with a Samaritan. Jesus takes the most despised person of his day and makes them the hero of the story.
Yeah.
Because they took the actions, took the risks, made the sacrifices necessary to save the one dying in the ditch. So the ditch today is the abortion mill, the abortion industry.
Right.
That's the ditch. And we have priests and Levites, I say that in quotes, walking by on the other side of the street, telling themselves, whatever it is they're telling themselves, why it's not their job to stop this Holocaust.
Right.
And we will pay a price for this. So, as you know, my book, Divine Correction, is coming out shortly. And by the way, if anyone helps us make that film, you saw at the end there, the Give, Send, Go page. If someone gives a gift to help with the film, we will send them an autographed copy of Divine Correction.
Absolutely.
So
I've
been studying.
Give us the website, Randall, where people can go and get involved in all of this. Get the books, know about the book, make donation to the film, all that. Where can they go?
Well, my website, randallterry.com. Well, you can click and play the video. The crowdfunding page is called givesendgo.com. Givesendgo.com. And the name of the film is Dragon Slayers. So you'd put in givesendgo.com/Dragon Slayers, or you can just go to randallterry.com. But when you make a contribution on Give, Send, Go, if it's $50 or more, I will send you an autographed copy of Divine Correction. Divine Correction is a book on the sins that cry to God for vengeance, and then how God deals with a nation. So the subtitle of the book is How God Gets a Nation's Attention.
Yeah.
So we're beginning to see it. I mean, Michael, you and I both know that so much of the unrest that is going on, so-called unrest, so much of the evil that's happening in our streets is actually the fruit of shedding innocent blood.
Of course it is. Absolutely.
This is not a mystery.
Right.
When a nation says we're going to kill our own children, God says, fine, I'll hand you over. I'll hand you over. Romans chapter 1. He hands over a people.
Yep.
And then he's got floods, droughts, bad weather, economic collapse, fear. There's so many tools in God's arsenal to get a nation's attention. So Divine Correction is the verse by verse, comprehensive look through the scriptures at how God deals with a nation that has embraced a sin that cries for vengeance.
Yeah.
So we're not just talking about, you know, a man did a bad thing. We're saying that our government, our federal government as a whole, has embraced, codified, promoted, wants to fund the shedding of innocent blood.
Yeah.
That puts a nation in real trouble.
I think you're correct.
Hope the people will get the book, give it to their priest. Get the book, give it to your priest. I wrote it basically for clergy, to be honest. I wrote the book as a study tool for clergy because it's something that's been neglected for so long.
Yeah, it does. It's shameful how you never hear anything of this import, or so seldom hear it. Or you approach a priest, for example. I'm sure the same thing happens in various Protestant congregations, but I'm Catholic, so that's my experience. You go to a priest after Mass and say, "Father, can we ever talk about that?" Well, it might upset people. Well, of course it's going to upset people, Father Dummy. That's the point, to wake people up. So, Randall Terry, thank you very much for joining us. We shall you come back on and keep us updated on how things are going, and whatever we can do to help with that. We are more than happy to pitch in and help. Randall Terry, founder of Operation Rescue, a true pro-life hero and warrior. Randall, thanks for joining us.
Michael, it's a pleasure as always. God bless you and the work of Church Milton. We love you guys. We respect you greatly.
Thanks very much, Randall. God bless.